Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Christian Whistleblower YouTube channel. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. So nice to have you with us today. I hope that you did catch the show we had earlier with Halo Marquese of MYSTECH. It was a great, groundbreaking show. You know, Halo's a great friend of mine, and I'm very excited and very honored to have with us today Deborah Tavares. I first learned of her from my girlfriend, Cynthia, who obviously is a lot smarter than me, listening to Deborah talk about her information on Project Camelot, and then going to Deborah's channel, which is stopthecrime.net on the internet, and then stopthecrime.net also on YouTube. And just looking at her YouTube channel, you've got cities caught arming us against the public, electricity, a new fuel, utilities control, 5G, water. Water is not a water is renewable. It's everything from A to Z. And just talking with her, with Deborah, very briefly before we went on air, the passion, the drive, the desire to really stop the cabal and the elites from taking over, and to help us rise up as one and take back what is rightfully ours, and not go quietly into the dark night. With us today is Deborah Tavares. Welcome to the Christian Whistleblower channel.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for having me on. So for those of you that may not know of our work, I would certainly suggest that all of you go to stopthecrime.net, look at our YouTube video channel, subscribe, and understand that we are pumping out more information right now than we ever have before, because what we're seeing here in Northern California, where I am located, 60 miles north of the Golden Gate Bridge, where we have experienced multiple fires, and right now we have a power shutdown from Pacific Gas and Electric. I'm going to describe some of this to you now because sadly our controlled media is sectionalizing what you're hearing in other parts of the country. And I have my ears, my research team listens. We have many contacts all over the world, and we're getting stories from other countries that are experiencing similar attacks, but we're not hearing about it unless they tell us, and then we can track all of these things. So we're going to try to tie that up. But a little about me. I am a grandmother, a mom, and a wife, and I have been married for 48 years. I did not come into this with any idea of what I would learn. I didn't know before I knew, and then I dug deep, because coming out of a building background, having a construction business in Southern California for many decades, certainly we had to work around the clock. Self-employment, as you know, is around the clock and not checking in on a clock. So having said that, I've dug into information in the beginning because I was seeing more and more restrictions in the building and planning codes that were preventing and controlling construction and actually designing in products that would then fall into a marketplace where interest rates would then be created and made extremely high, 16% loans during some of the times of our marketing career, and difficulty with people buying and acquiring homes. So I certainly never knew that that was all a banking scam and a scheme to literally destroy and reduce the amount of housing, while you're hearing across the country a cry for affordable housing. What is happening is increased homelessness, and that is a plan. So I'm just going to say something that was recently observed. Right now across the country, your cities are updating their building and planning codes. Now, what we observed just a week and a half ago here in Sonoma County, where we burned down in 2017, many of you may remember, we lost about 5,300 homes on October the 8th and 9th of 2017. And certainly not the number of lost homes and lost lives that were experienced just a year later in Paradise, California. But I wanted to say, in the building code that we're seeing now as upgrades, we're seeing that they're devising plans to build low-income housing on wetlands, on mudflats, and marshes. Now, we have tremendous conditions for that between Sonoma County. Again, I'm 60 miles north of the Golden Gate Bridge. So in this 60 miles, there are many wetlands and mudflats and areas that are described in the change of these building codes that are now saying they can build a type of floating home in these areas of wetlands and offer this housing to low-income, moderate people. Well, I went then, just last week, to our vector control meeting, and I discovered that the vector control had a doctor, Dr. Rome, R-O-A-M, that spoke, and he was saying that because of the increased population getting closer and closer to the wetlands, mosquitoes and vectors and control of new pathogens have become difficult, if not impossible. In other words, they are bioweaponizing the low-income marsh and floating home building areas with a weapons system of poisonous mosquitoes. Now, they talked about then the need to start spraying heavily over these areas. Now, we discovered at that same vector control meeting months and months ago that back during Hurricane Harvey in Texas, in Houston, there were 6 million acres of properties that were sprayed by the U.S. Air Force under the recommendations of the Pentagon. They sprayed nulite. It is a neurotoxin that is developed and sold through Monsanto. We are being sprayed with toxins, and new codes are coming out to place low-income people that we pay for through bonds to place them in these areas where they will be softly and slowly killed. So that I have a discussion on stopthecrime.net about that. I will be expanding on this. We attend meetings around the clock here because we're very close to Bohemian Grove, just a half an hour. Many of you know of Bohemian Grove. It is the Bilderberg West in the United States, and it is where on an annual basis and uncounted times in between, where the top globalists in this country meet to design policies and take down agendas for all of us. And the next thing I want to certainly remind everybody about is what the FBI Director, J. Edgar Hoover, told us back in 1956. And this is a quote. He said, "The individual is handicapped by coming face to face with a conspiracy so monstrous he cannot believe it exists. The American mind simply has not come to the realization of the evil which has been introduced into our midst. It rejects even the assumption that human creatures could espouse a philosophy which must ultimately destroy all that is good and decent." Now, if you can grasp what is being said, this is a warning, and it is horrific, and our reality is as well. And we are posting encouragement and actions that people can take. So while you are going to hear me with Jeff today talking about the unthinkable, it is unthinkable. And we encourage you to follow our videos on stopthecrime.net and get active. And many ways in which you can do that, because people are now starting to become aware here. We're in massive power shutdowns, and I will describe that. But I want to remind everybody what we were not taught in school, and this has to be really placed into your mind so you don't forget the greatest whistleblower comment of all time, and that was John F. Kennedy's warning. And he said, "For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system that has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, and economic, scientific, and political operations. That covers it all. The United States is a corporation, and as such, we are living in an illusion of a country where we can vote in people that represent us. And I can say to you, that was the foundational understanding that our team had to leap into psychologically to understand the enormity of what we were told so many decades ago by John F. Kennedy in this profound speech. So we need to be teaching our children many of these things now. And it is horrific, but these are the times that they're living in. And sadly, they have been brought up in indoctrination camps called schools, public education. They are indoctrination camps. And what we face is the fact that we have, as parents, literally orphaned our children to schools for indoctrination because we are overworked and we can't take care of our children ourselves and we cannot teach them the facts or the truth. I am seeing traumatized children all over the world. I'm seeing traumatized children right here in the town where I live because what we saw and what we will be posting up on stopthecrime.net because we filmed it was during the request by the globalist for the children to walk out of school and protest climate change and encourage all your city leaders to get behind resolutions that would promote policies to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. We saw kids crying because they are now understanding and being told that if we as adults and civic leaders, which do not exist, and I'll explain that later, do not bring in these climate action requirements, the future for them might only have a 10-year window. They might only survive 10 to 12 years. That's what they are being taught in school right now. We are traumatizing the kids. We are causing emotional distress, and we are pushing a false agenda because climate change is the use of technologies, not only through policies, but through directed energy weapons and weather warfare. Now, many of you know that climate change is induced worldwide, and it has been for a very long time. I'm going to read to you a quote that is very important, and if you think about what you can do to get this information out, we're giving you ideas right now, and you can take a look at the videos and get some further ideas on what you can do to further this information within your town because you're going to need to. And here's a quote from about weather warfare, and this is from William S. Cohen, 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 who was the U.S. Defense Secretary. And this was from a Department of Defense news briefing back on April 28th of 1997. And William S. Cohen said this: Others are engaging even in an eco-type of terrorism, whereby they can alter the climate, set off earthquakes, volcanoes remotely through the use of electromagnetic waves. So there are plenty of ingenious minds out there that are at work finding ways in which they can wreak terror upon other nations. It's real, and that's the reason why we have to intensify our efforts. Sadly, the weaponization has increased in the United States and everywhere worldwide. And many countries are being continuously attacked, and so is the United States. Here in Northern California, the fires that we have been experiencing are multifaceted. Certainly we know that they are using space-based weapon systems and lasers, and we know that the pulsing of the smart meters that were deployed upon our houses as an energy transition a number of years ago, and many of you likely have smart meters as well. That's the electric smart grid that it has been and is still being rolled out worldwide. While it is pretty much deployed, I want to say this. My husband and I have traveled. We have wanted to see for ourselves if some of this crosses borders, such as in Russia. So we did. We traveled to Russia. We also went to Cuba. We went to South America. We went to London. We went to Ireland, etc. And the rollout of the smart grid is everywhere in all of those countries, and the weather weaponization is everywhere in all of those countries. The frequencies, the increased frequencies of the towers are wireless cell phones that are actually a weapon system. And now the requirements to start buying wireless connected appliances and more in your homes is worldwide. Worldwide. So there are no borders. There are no borders. This is attacking everybody, and we are a worldwide community of humans now, humanity, that must now come together, and we must. And so with that, I'm going to cover what we also discovered. Years ago, when we were certainly protesting here in Northern California against the deployment of the smart grid, we learned many things. We learned that the utility company here, Pacific Gas and Electric, is run by Rothschild. We also learned that Southern California, Edison, under Edison International, is run by Rothschild. Con Ed out of New York is run by Rothschild. We, in fact, now
And Deborah, I
realize,
assume when you make those statements that you, being the researcher you are, have actually found paper trails and hard documented data to be able to make those statements.
Absolutely. In
Thank
fact,
you.
even one better. Personally, I was attending a number of years ago now a annual shareholders meeting at the main headquarters in San Francisco with Pacific Gas and Electric. I managed to Velcro myself to somebody that had a proxy so that I could try to get into that shareholders meeting, and I did. And I was sitting there as they were introducing some of the front row participants that were there at the meeting. Now, the front row people did not stand up, so you did not know who they were, but they started naming the names of introduction. And they said, Mr. Rothschild. And I elbowed the person that was sitting next to me, and I said, did you hear that? I said, is that the Rothschild family? Well, I will tell you, I was a little distracted with that. I thought, good heavens, is that possible? Because I had also another mission that day. I knew that Pacific Gas and Electric has permits for weather control, seeding of the clouds in California, so that they could create more rain events to increase the reservoirs so that they could produce more hydroelectricity. And I also knew from Rosalind Peterson, who ran a website, Agriculture Defense Coalition, all about the overhead geoengineering programs and how demonic it was, and the effects of all the overhead spraying was on all of our food supply. And I learned from her that Pacific Gas and Electric had a weather floor in their main headquarters in San Francisco. So when I had the badge on, I walked over to the other building and was able to get up into that 16th floor in PG&E a number of years ago.
That's true citizen reporting, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, and that's what I'm going to spend a little more time on that than I want to, only because I want people to hear the process and the length of time that it has taken. And we no longer, literally, Jeff, have the length of time to find some of these things out. That's why we have what I would call cliff notes in our YouTube video presentations, and I don't know how many videos I have up and out. I really don't. I don't keep track. But I would hope that everybody would start listening to them, because this is how these stories develop. And then we go back and we have people that research this. And when we researched Rothschild, it was simple then. But they have literally wiped the search engine that we used then, and it was simple. What we did was we typed in Pacific Gas and Electric followed by Rothschild, and bam, there it showed a man by the name of Roger Kimmel, Kimmel. He was the CEO of Rothschild Inc., Rothschild LLC. So we started to track the Rothschild connection through all of the utilities, and we realized that was and the reason for the worldwide deployment of the electric smart grid. So I go back now to the smart meters. Not only have your original analog meters, which your utility meter reader needed to come out and read every month so you could be sent a bill, they've been replaced by and large by a wireless smart meter. They are deadly. They can be pulsed on individual homes, and the frequencies can be massively amplified to cause cancer and other symptoms and cause illness and, in some instances, death. So we have a symptoms list on stopthecrime.net that I would wish everybody would download and keep it with you always, because many of you, and I would say actually everyone without failure, is now suffering from the symptoms of the over-electrification in our environment from wireless. And this
so,
is all
Deborah, you're saying
intentional.
essentially they've attached a weapon to every one of our homes.
Absolutely. That is what it is. So the symptom list talks about some of the results of that weaponized attached system, but I'm going to expand upon it. But I'm going to go over just a few symptoms right now. But what everyone needs to understand is that this frequency is jamming our immune systems. We're not functioning. This is micro radiation frequencies, and some of the symptoms include confusion, short-term memory loss, brain fog, difficulty concentrating, headaches, migraines, vision disruptions, and eye problems. And I want to add to that, the LED lights are also a weapons system that has been approved through the Department of Energy in USA Inc. And I say USA Inc. because we are a corporation. And the LED lights that are now being forced upon all of us, and the replacement of all of our original incandescent lights, have blue light, and it causes blindness. It decreases the melatonin, so we're not able to get into our REM sleep at night to recover from the attacks that we're being confronted with during the day. So one of the solutions is to certainly figure out how you turn off on your iPhones the blue light. There's a way to do that. Also on your computer screens, we're recommending everybody go and get blue light glasses that will help block them, blue light blocker glasses. I do have an LED YouTube up. It's called, I believe it's called LEDs. Well, I'm not even going to try to guess. I have an LED warning YouTube up and out, and that was a couple of years ago that I put that out. You'll find that on stopthecrime.net, talking about the symptoms of the LED lights. And interestingly enough, when we went into the ophthalmologist office, we found a trifold that talked about all of the dangers of not only the LED lights that we're now putting in our homes and the CFL lights, but also all of the street lights. They are also a weapons system as well. And when we went to London, Jeff, about 6 months ago, and I gave a presentation, which I did again when we were here, and that's up on stopthecrime.net. It is a 5-part presentation, and I would pray that everybody would listen to it and start at the first one. You're going to see more views on some of the, they go part 1, part 2, part 3, etc. Start at part 1 because I roll into it and explain. Now there's many levels of assaults, and I can only cover so many levels, but this is going to really show you why and how genocide is legal and how this happened and the policies behind this. So it is important for everyone to watch that. It is really a compilation of many years of documents, and the effort from us here in Northern California to certainly give you information wherever you are, to help, to know, to learn, so that you can become warriors. We all now need to be warriors in this battlefield that we're all on, whether you realize it or not. We're all on a battlefield. And what I want to further talk about the frequencies is, of course, the 5G rollout. The 5G rollout is also much to do with thought control and mind control, and it is a foundation necessary for the RFID chip that is going to be suggested that people have. This is the mark of the beast. And I also discuss that in that 5-part video series, Jeff. And because I can't go into every topic that I'm going to bring up today, that's why I'm referring to the videos so that people can get more information as they hear me talk today. I am appealing to people that will open their minds, see reality for what it is, and refuse to be thought-controlled or indoctrinated in a reality for us that does not exist. And I just don't know what other way to say this, but we're all being eliminated. And there are documents that talk about the plans and the percentages of death that is to be accomplished in short order here. And I talk about that in many of my videos, and it is a military document that talks about the planned reduction here in the United States of about 83% by the year 2025. And the same thing applies.
Deborah, what would that number be? I'm not really aware of the number of our population right now in the U.S. What would 83% of the U.S. population be?
I guess people, the way it's been described to me, would be to think about 9 out of 10.
It's a lot of people.
Yes. And we can look at the Georgia Guidestones as one example of a number, but this is further. And there are different percentages prescribed in this elimination document for the UK and for Australia. where we're looking at higher percentages of planned elimination of the population reduction in the industrialized areas, because they're selling the illusion that the industrialized areas have greater use of technologies and resources that are increasing the greenhouse gas emissions because we're wealthier countries, and that we must be massively reduced. Now, the plan is to eliminate resource accessibility down to a minimum allotment per each individual. In other words, a reduction to the extent that will only allow for vital existence, for vital life. We find that, again, I talk about that in many of the videos, but I can just illustrate this because this is discussed as part of the Wildlands Project, which many of you, I hopefully by now, have seen the map. You can find that map on stopthecrime.net. Just type in the search bar Wildlands Map, and you'll pull up the map that we illustrate, and you're going to see at the top Wildlands Project Map, Human Access. It is a map of the United States, and it talks about how this came to be, and it shows the human settlement zone. In other words, where people are allowed to live, and that's what we're now experiencing. We're now seeing, with the deployment not only of the wireless electric smart meters, but also the smart wireless water meters. And we're going to start seeing massive reductions of these resources in policies that are being made by psychopaths and by those that control the monetary wealth worldwide. So what I mean by that is here in California, an example, and here's what I really want to eliminate right now, and I can't say this bold enough or underlined enough. What you hear happening in California and what you may hear me saying now about California is in your town. So don't just think, oh, well, California is full of Democrats and it should just fall off and float off into the ocean. Many people think, well, they're experimenting with California first. No. Experimentation is over. They are deploying what they've already tested many, many, many decades ago. And this is in your town. So what I want to recommend is for everyone to understand that. So, for example, Jeff.
But why the focus on California, Deborah? Obviously, they're taking a big brunt.
No, let me restate this. That's what you're being told.
Okay? I see. Okay, I get it.
Yeah, you're being told that. So you think it's just in California.
Got it.
So that as it comes over your threshold. Now, here's what I'd like to suggest. Type in the name of your state or your major city where nearest you. And you can do that, Jeff. And if you'd like to tell people what you find, here's what you do. And everybody can do this as well. On your search bar, type in the name of your city. Now, an example of that for me is I would type in Sonoma County, California, and I would type in right next to that, Climate Action Plan. And the plan would come up. And it can be referred to sometimes as the Resilient Plan or the Energy Action Plan. They're all the same. Those are plans requiring that your cities under the United Nations, the World Bank, Rothschild, and the IMF reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. Now, people aren't thinking about what and why we need greenhouse gas. Our forest, our food supply would be lush, green, and in abundance, not withering, dying, and becoming kindling, so that they can use the dead and dying forests to massively exacerbate the energy weapons used on us to destroy our cities. We need greenhouse gas emissions. And in that
Just to let you
five-part,
know, I did what you said and pulled up, and it appears as in my locality that back in May 2019 they launched this climate project, and they've been talking about it since May of 2019. In June 2020, up to September 2020, which is coming around the corner, they're going to publish the final climate action plan. And then it says project closure event and discussion of next steps for the Climate Action Summit in 2020. So it is in my town undergoing right now, and I've never heard a word about it.
okay, so what's most important to understand is that's only the top layer of discussion that you have just found. There are other layers of prior discussions a few years ago, because what's most important for people to understand is this. And here's what I'd like for you to do, Jeff, if you would, and you can explain this while I'm talking to people after you pull this up. But I want to say something first. There's a format that is rolling out and has been put in place, and it goes like this. Your cities, who you believe as council members and county boards of supervisors, you believe you elect? No. The staff is writing the policies that the council people and boards of supervisors adopt. It's the staffers. And they're bringing in and adopting policies of demise, of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which is based on fraud. It's fraudulent. And it's fraudulent science. Now, I am not a climate denier. This is most important for everyone to understand. It's placing the reason for climate change in reality, and it is technologies and weather weapons. The climate has changed severely. We are put in a drought right now in California. We, as we speak, right now, here in Northern California, are in a red flag fire warning. I will explain. That means when they create the environment to such that we can ignite and fires can explode. Now, Rothschild, our utility company, has come up with a plot to turn off the power so that their lines will not exacerbate or spark because of vegetation or trees, and to prevent fires. No, they're the fire starters. Now they're just starting the fires, and we're in the dark. Now, I can say to you that the red flag fire warning is described as this: low humidity, high winds, and heat. And all of those conditions are created. What is not being said is that those days prior to the red flag fire warnings, during the red flag warnings, which we have now, and after, we are very, very heavily chemtrailed. That's a requirement to exacerbate conditions, to figuratively drop the match, because it's fresh spraying of the combustibles of strontium and barium that are highly, that ignite, and our fires explode. And one common firefighters' experience on the line of fighting these fires is they've never fought fires in the past that were as hot and as fast. Never. So what kind of fires are they fighting? These men and women are being sent out on the front lines, not being told they're fighting a weaponized fire. They are attacking fires as a traditional fire would have existed in the past. And they're being sent out. As a result of the fires here in 2017, they've been testing the blood of the firefighters, and they found extremely high levels of mercury.
And Deborah, are they still using traditional firefighting methods, or have they improved or modernized, so to speak, the firefighting weapons to stay current with the new type of fires?
Absolutely not.
Mm.
Well, I say that with a caveat. I want to say what now is occurring is increased drops of fire retardant, which is very toxic and poisonous. In fact,
Right.
it's not to be dumped over any waterways or creeks. Well, when the smoke is heavy and they're dropping, such as what happened in 2002 in an area near Bend, Oregon, within 24 hours, there were many miles of dead fish as a result of dumping the fire retardant. This is also a way in which to kill off the population. It increases the toxic and contaminations in the water runoff, kills our fish, and then we're being accused of all the damage that is being done to us.
And it's probably
Now,
an oxygen suppressor too, which of course would kill anything that breathes.
that's exactly what it does. And the oxygen, by the way, is being decreased in our environment as we speak right now from some of the geoengineering components and things that are occurring, and also the reduction of plant life. Plant life is being killed off. Now, here in 2020 in California, and again, I want everybody to think in your town, because this is in your town too. Just because I'm a native Californian and I am now trying to express this, this is all worldwide, in fact, not just in the United States. We've traveled up to British Columbia. We have seen what they're doing up there. So again, worldwide, think worldwide. But a
Deborah,
policy
can
here
I
in California.
reiterate just one more time? What you're telling us, if I understand you correctly, is that the California emphasis that we see in the media is in effect a smoke and mirrors or a magician's, in this case, a dark magician's distraction tool to make us think it's all California, California, California. It's a California problem. It's restricted there, when in fact it's being rolled out not only across the rest of the country, but the rest of the world and as a whole.
Perfectly said. That's exactly right. Exactly right. And what is happening is, after the most recent fire that we just experienced a couple of weeks ago, and now the consistent turning off of electricity, we have small and medium-sized businesses being forced into closing, because many of the restaurants and various smaller businesses cannot have forced shutdowns. In October, a combination of outages impacted small businesses by not being able to open for 10 days, and not consecutively. And many small businesses, in order to try to stay in business, are buying generators so that they can at least hook up and have some power in their businesses. But it's unbelievable to now learn that the Air Quality Management Control is now saying that the use of generators is increasing greenhouse gas emissions, and that should not be allowed. In fact, all fossil fuels must be eliminated. So right now, Jeff, what I would like for you to do, and I want everybody else to hear this too, and you can type in on your search bar, Sonoma County, California, Board of Supervisors, Climate Resolution.
Board of Supervisors?
Now, yes, Sonoma County, California, Board of Supervisors, Climate Resolution, and you will have some choices. Now, I could do this and not have you do this, Jeff.
Right.
I have it right in front of me, but I am going to try to empower people so that they understand what is occurring and how your cities have deceived you and your counties. Have you located that?
I typed it in the search bar and it's come up with all the results.
Okay, so look for the result that is, I believe it's September of 2018.
I've got a September 17, 2019.
No, you're looking for 2018.
Yeah, these are all, first page is all 2019. So let's go see when we get to 2018.
Well, while you're looking for that, I'm going to explain what you'll find. you're going to find a 3-page document, a resolution that the board approved in eliminating idling of cars.
Climate Change Action Resolution, County of Sonoma.
Yep.
And that's May 8th, 2018?
It could be. Yep. Click on it.
All right.
I want you to walk people through what you're seeing so that people can be empowered. Now, again, I underscore, this is not just California. This is your town. While you're hunting for this, I want to talk about this. Here is the stages of takedown that is presenting itself worldwide.
Yeah, I'm looking at resolution highlights. Increase building energy efficiency, increase renewable energy, switch from fossil fuel to electricity, reduce travel.
Stop right there. Yes. Okay, read those last two. Reduce fossil fuel.
Reduce, switch equipment from fossil fuel to electricity, and reduce travel through focused growth.
Okay, so focused growth means smart cities.
Yes,
focused growth.
Tell us where to live and where we can't live. This is frightening, folks. This is real world stuff.
Yes, and that's why I'm taking the time to have you explain this to people, Jeff, so that people understand. You're finding this. They can find this too. These are documents that we present on stopthecrime.net. It's evil, and it is absolutely a takedown of everything we ever dreamed our country represented.
And the one you talked about, reduced idling, that's number 8.
Yeah, there's a number of things within that. Go through and you can spot many of those horrific aspects. But what you said about
here's a fun one. Let's increase gray water usage. Folks, you know what gray water is? Explain to Deborah what gray water is.
Yeah, okay. So there's several interpretations of gray water, okay? You can direct your washing machines directly out onto your land and let that filter in. In other words, that doesn't have to go into the sewer system of your town. But there's a massive movement now to build, this is through executive order, by the way, to build wastewater treatment plants. And I have just posted a number of documents relating to that, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
One is called Toilet to Tap, the Plans for All.
That sounds great to me.
Yeah, this is being built. These are being built worldwide. In fact, I just received an email from a contact in Ireland. 600,000 people in Ireland over the past month have had their water shut off because of increased contaminations and spillovers from the wastewater treatment plant. And now they're talking about increasing the reuse and recycling of your urine, your poop, and pharmaceuticals. And pharmaceuticals are contaminations of emerging concern. And what they're doing is it's a closed loop system. They're telling us we're running out of water, and we're not. This is some
Deborah,
of the best.
If they can't get me to take pharmaceuticals, they can't get you to take pharmaceuticals. They can get us all to take them by making us all drink water that contains it.
Well, that's exactly right. And of course, what they spray overhead.
Right.
And in the food supply. That's why some of the actions that we all need to take is food selection. We're certainly looking at trying to become more self-sufficient because, Jeff, we're being cut off of the food supply. There was also an executive order for fast-tracking GMO biofood. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
Well, now you do, and so do all your listeners. There was an executive order by the current CEO, Trump, who is fast-tracking genetically modified food because of food scarcity and climate change. Now, I need to clear something up right now. People who are conservative and are behind the current CEO are misunderstanding how this country is functioning. And in 1933, when we were bankrupted, and certainly many other examples, this is just one, we were bankrupted as a country, and we were collateralized by the International Bank, the IMF, and the United Nations. And we are run by the corporate structure, the IMF, the international bankers, the World Bank, aka the UN, etc. And this is a global agenda. It's facing every breathing person on this planet and every breathing thing, every living thing on this planet. We are being systematically destroyed. So what do we do? Well, we learn what is happening, and we do everything we can to empower ourselves with knowledge so that we're not hit blindsided in the dark with fires lapping at your heels as you are forced to relocate via floods. Now, what are some of the main events weather-wise in your area that you're experiencing, Jeff? Is it floods? Is it tornadoes? What is it?
Where we are, we're very fortunate. We haven't really had any major weather issues. I mean, there's been a little bit of flooding, but nothing huge. No tornadoes. I guess we've been living in a little bit of a paradise. We don't really have anything to complain about.
Do you have smart meters there?
I just moved here, so I'm not sure. I think we do have smart meters, but certainly not the proliferation of them. We're in rural middle America, so I doubt that we have the proliferation of them that they do in the more heavily populated areas.
Well, that would be true.
And Cynthia, if you know the answer, let me know in the chat, please.
Okay, so let's carry on here because okay. I'm trying to make an important point. Are you being sprayed overhead?
Yes, but not as much as I was living in Florida, Clearwater, Florida, Tampa Bay area.
Oh, that was very heavy.
It was huge, but since I've been here in Kansas, to me, it looks like there's really not anything there. But we do see chemtrails. We just don't see them nearly as much as I did in Florida. And no, we don't have a smart meter on our house, and many of the houses in our area don't have them either. We're south of the metropolitan area, so I think that we're still in a pretty good and fortunate situation here.
Okay, so now let me say, for all of you that are listening, if you don't have the smart meter yet, you will. Do not think you're going to be overlooked. I had many friends in the Ohio area that kept saying, well, they're not going to deploy it here. And they then got their deployment letters. So I don't want anybody to sit back thinking, well, I'm going to be safe here, because you're not. The chemtrailing is poisonous in and of itself. The reduction of food is going to affect everyone. We have enormous populations now, Jeff, of homeless people as a result of housing that's not affordable, rentals that don't exist, houses that have been eliminated from the housing stock because of fires. And we have Airbnb here, vacation rentals, because people love to come here on the coast above San Francisco to the wine country.
So you're in Marin County?
I am north of Marin.
Okay.
I am in the Santa Rosa area.
Okay.
Yep, that's where I am. And I said area. So so what I want to emphasize is the fact that Airbnb is run by Google. It is a method to literally entice people that have second homes to put them under Airbnb contractual agreements so that they're rented out. And the homeowner can, of course, block out a space where they can utilize their home for themselves. Now, after the fires in 2017, many homes, over 5,000 that were destroyed, people were trying to get into other housing, still staying in the area to work on insurance settlements, etc., which is another conversation I'll say right now. Insurance is being canceled. but we'll get into that in a minute. Remind me that I want to talk about that. But the Airbnb has been set up to reduce housing on a month-to-month basis in your city so that the homes that are secondary homes are not available to year-round occupancy.
Wow, I never even considered that. I've used a lot of Airbnbs, and as you describe it, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so what happened after the fires is Airbnb told the homeowners that were under contractual agreement that they could offer their homes to fire victims if they did not collect any money, and only for a couple of weeks, that they still had to live up to the terms of their rental scheduling. So we had very good friends that moved every 2 weeks out on the coast from one Airbnb to the next. And they were traumatized. They left their homes on October 8th with no fire warning at all. People were knocking on doors, Jeff, and the flames were literally lapping at people's heels as they were running out of their homes at 1 and 2 in the morning on October 9th. It was diabolical what happened.
Wow.
You asked me earlier in the show if they have improved firefighting. Well, what they have improved is the evacuation. Now, one of the large problems here when we were hit by fires, now I want everyone to think also of floods and other types of weather conditions that might require an evacuation. What was discovered is vans, as in small buses, of people being bussed up from the San Francisco Bay Area that were looting the homes when they were vacated.
So they were bringing people in to loot.
Yes. Now, you've got to think of it like this, because that does sound crazy. Wouldn't you agree?
It does. It does. It
Okay.
sounds nutty.
Okay, so let's think about this. Let's back into it. The fires that started on the 8th and the 9th of 2017 here was a war.
Was that October?
October.
Okay.
October 8th and 9th of 2017. Now, I've posted many videos. This was an intentional fire. It was created. And back in 2015, I had a video up entitled Plan to Burn Up Northern California. So for those of you who have not listened to that, you need to, because we discovered some intentions back before the fires started. But having said that, let's talk about the looters that they bust in. We're under attack. This country is under attack. Our economy is being devastated. The different types of weather events that people are experiencing are certainly degrading local economies. We have not regained here since the 2017 fires. So this is war. This was a planned attack. And so bringing in looters is just part of that attack. We had people dressed in camo outfits, running down the creeks and hiding. And in fact, there was an interesting book written called Point Patrol. And it was a book written by some people that stayed and did not evacuate in a very wealthy area that was burned to the ground, primarily here. It burned a Hilton Hotel, and it burned a historical building called the Round Barn here. Mm-hmm. And then it jumped the freeway and burned into a residential community, burning up about 1,500 homes. And a group stayed behind in a cul-de-sac. And there was a ex-fire captain there, or firefighter, whatever, and he rolled out the hoses from all the homes that were in the cul-de-sac to the middle of the road. And he had valves on them, and he turned them all on. He had water accessed in all these hoses. And he was putting out the ember fires, that all the embers that were floating down onto the mulch, the wood mulch, again, highly combustible problem that was occurring here. Anyway, other people stayed there too. One of their big problems was to keep the looters out of their street, and they wrote across the front in paint in the front of the cul-de-sac, "Looters will be shot." And they were literally chasing looters out of the homes with shovels. Now, this is written about in Point Patrol. This was their experience during the fires. But they saved their cul-de-sac. They also saved an apartment building. Most everything else around them was burned to the ground. Now, that night, we were actually driving in towards the fires to try to help people evacuate. We were getting calls from friends and family members that they needed help in getting out. And I can tell you the roads were blocked coming away from the fires, and it was a horrific night, a horrific, horrific night. Since then, there have been many people that are living in RVs, all parked all around the county. There are RVs parked on streets everywhere with their cars so they can come and go, because many have not been able to rebuild for various reasons. They didn't have enough insurance. Many have had their insurance canceled. And if they can't rebuild with cash and they need to get financing, they're not able to afford they have an insurance fund here in California that insures aspects but very little coverage and at a very high premium. An example, we had a friend that has a house and a guest house on property. They were paying about $13,000 a year for coverage on their property. They then got a quote after the fires at $50,000.
Wow.
Per year. So they fell back on the California FAIR plan. Now, I want everybody to hear this loud and clear. The insurance companies are run by the international bankers. They're run by the international bankers. And we are finding now that insurance is being canceled. Certainly, Jeff, are you aware of, I know you know about chemtrailing or overhead aerial spraying or geoengineering, which is, of course, the deliberate large-scale manipulation of the Earth's climate, right? You know about that.
Yes, ma'am.
But many people are unaware of what's happening around the coastlines. And I discussed this in that 5-part video YouTube series, and I was stunned when our team discovered this, because we're very, very familiar with the NASA war plan that we have up on Stop the Crime. And
Did you say NASA?
NASA, the
Okay.
NASA war plan. You can find that on stopthecrime.net by searching on the search bar. But what we kept seeing, and it was a PowerPoint that was delivered by a chief NASA scientist 2 months before our 9/11. And it talks about much of what is now occurring. And I'm just going to go over a few pages, but I want to dive back into the water, because right now the water is being reduced, and we're all going to be told we're running out, and we're not. So I'm going to just go over.
Water's renewable, right? That's one of the main points you wanted to
It
make.
is a renewable. And go to we run the website primarywater.org and understand why and how water really works. We have been psyopsed and indoctrinated through fuel to believe that water comes from rain and snowmelt. Actually, rain and snowmelt is the process of evaporation of water that's created down below the mantle with the process of hydrogen and oxygen that creates a vapor and comes up in hot and cold springs, in geysers that spray up out of the ground endlessly. You know, Jeff, I never wondered where that water was shooting out from and how that kept happening. Many people don't think about that. Where does that water continue to come from? Where does the water come from that flows out of the top of volcanic structures in the Hawaiian Islands and just cascades down into these wonderful pools that people hike into vacation and swim in?
They have
People
those
are
in
not,
Mexico too. They call them cenotes.
yes, people are not asking, where is this water coming from? The oases. And what happened in Libya with Muammar Gaddafi, and why Libya was attacked by NATO and the United States and blown to smithereens.
And,
The,
I didn't know it then, but I was in the U.S. Air Force at that time, and I was part of that attack on Muammar Gaddafi. And if I had known then what I know now, I wouldn't have been involved.
well, that's exactly right. And now that you know what you know, other people can also know what you know by reading. I think it's like in Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. It's roughly about a 45-page document. I would recommend everybody watch. I believe it's start with 42, roughly. You're going to find out what the story is behind the military. And it will put a different perspective on what's happened. I can tell you that my husband was in Vietnam, and he was in the Navy, and he was in the Gulf of Tonkin in 1967 when the USS Forrestal was nearly sunk by John McCain. And my husband's aircraft carrier, the Oriskany, was first on the scene to try to help put the fires out. But sadly, the fire teams on the Forrestal were killed as the blasts of live planes were all blowing up on deck. You knew about this, right?
Yes, Deborah, do you think McCain was just an idiot, or was he actually trying to sink that ship?
Well, that's an opinion I would hate to give.
Okay.
I can tell you from looking at different testimonies of people that experienced his antics, graduating in the bottom rung in school, but because his father was an admiral, he was quickly elevated. I know that he did some low flyovers over, I think it was in Italy, where he actually caught the high power lines on the tips of his plane and then landed on the aircraft carrier, and they had to untangle the wires.
So he was a Top Gun mind with a brain that couldn't support his bravado.
Well, I will leave that alone.
Yeah.
Other than to say,
I met the man, and he was the biggest songbird. He was a traitor to his country. He was a liar, and I'll stop there.
So I would leave it here with recommending everybody read certainly all of Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, but I'm going to explain this right now, and I'm going to read a quote out of Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. And if you have anybody in the chat that's asking questions, I would love to field questions, but let me just keep going.
Sure.
Because I think this quote is absolutely necessary for everybody to understand. In the Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, and I'm actually trying to find that quote right now, it says more or less this, that we must be controlled, the people must be controlled, so that the elites can transfer the energy control and all the resources under their control. And until such time that that energy is transferred to their full control, we have the ability to disrupt that. And what do I mean? Okay, right now we are being transitioned to complete electrification of our homes. Every refrigerator, every appliance is going to be connected to the smart meter. That's why all of you will get one. Not all of you, though. There's some that don't have them, but most of the people will have the smart meters, those people that don't realize what they're for. And they are pulsed also, and they do start fires.
Deborah, does this
Ah,
include we're taught that these Tesla home batteries are the greatest thing in the world. You can electrify your whole home, and
it's a weapon.
it's a weapon.
It's a weapon, and here's why it's a weapon. They're lithium ion. Lithium ion batteries are highly combustible, and they degrade, and then they explode, and they also catch fire, and they're very difficult to put out. In fact, there was a junior college here in Santa Rosa that put on a solar panel array, or installed a solar panel array, and then connected it to a Tesla battery wall. And they had to notify the fire department that they had the Tesla battery wall because of the conditions of exploding. The same thing would apply to the e-bikes, the electric bikes that are now very much prevalent in Europe and starting to filter into the United States, because they're moving us into an enclosed environment. Now, you read that in that document. And it said centralize building, basically smart cities. In other words, create growth in centralized areas, and that would be in my language.
What was that movie, Hunger Games? They're trying to make us into Hunger Games.
Oh, it is. Oh, it is. It is. As well as getting us accustomed to eating human flesh.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that, right?
Yes, I know that, and I know that's not the focus of this show, but really, when you think about it, the people that are the powers that be have been advocating the eating of human flesh and the drinking of human blood for about 2,000 years, every single Sunday. I just thought I'd throw that in.
Yeah. Well, we won't go further on that because there's so much more. But I mean, that is also happening. In fact, I will just drop this in, and then I won't talk about it further. There's a restaurant that serves up human flesh.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll just say it's called the Cannibal Club. It's in Los Angeles.
Yeah, that won't be on my list.
Yeah. Well, so let's move back in to what's happening with energy. First of all, everybody's hearing zero net energy. We've got to get down to zero waste. We've got to get down to zero. Zero means eliminating mass swaths of the population, because years back on the Department of Energy website, we found a document, and it talked about the real goal of energy use and what aiming for zero really means. And it says sustainability, which everyone is hearing. We must be sustainable. It says sustainability is not the same thing as zero energy. There is no such thing as zero energy. Energy does not exist in a vacuum. It always comes from somewhere and goes somewhere. The ultimate goal is not to use energy. The most efficient energy is energy we do not generate. This is not a technology. It's a behavior modification, or learning to live in a new reality. Now, because, and I hope you heard that, right?
I did.
Yeah, it's a behavior modification. That is why in 2020 we are being reduced to our water consumption is being reduced to 55 gallons of water per person per day. Now, we've had many people here trying to accomplish that goal, and they've only been able to get down to about 189 gallons of water per day. And I mean, they're wringing out wash rags, right? They're really conserving. And they called the water agency and said, we just can't get it down to 55 gallons. What are we going to do? And they said, well, are you watering anything outside? And they said, well, of course. We've got some plants, my rose garden, etc. And they said, you can't water anything outside. This is interior water use only.
So they're trying to make us believe that water is zero sum when it's very dynamic.
Exactly. Exactly. And they're reducing the oxygen by reducing the watering of vegetation.
It's almost like they're trying to kill us, Deborah.
Well, Jeff, I'm so glad we're talking because we're still alive.
That we
And
are.
while we are, we need to get this information to people, because I can tell you this. The journey in this information has been more than painful. And I call it truth trauma because I have had some very difficult time in really digesting some of the horror. In fact, to the extent that we needed to vet some of this to the nth degree, and we even flew back to Washington, D.C. and looked in the records department. And we had an emergency meeting with the family because we told them, if we find this document there, then our lives have changed forever. And our lives did change forever because we went to find this particular document. And it was sent to, a paragraph was sent to us by a retired neurologist friend of ours. And I talk about this on radio. And it said basically, it was a statute, it was a law that was passed by Congress authorizing the Department of Defense to use chemicals and biologicals on the American civilian population without their or our knowledge or consent. And in those days, I thought that impossible. Our government would not do this to us. That would be impossible. Well, our government has been doing more to us than just that. We subsequently found out about many projects and operations that have been conducted over us. I mean, certainly all of us are aware of the overhead aerial chemtrailing, the changing of the weather, the reduction of the food supply, but there have been many direct assaults. There was one called, and I think it was called Operation Sea Spray, and that was SEA Spray. And that was conducted over San Francisco, and at the time in the 50s that was conducted, there were about 800,000 people that were sprayed. And it literally contributed to urinary tract infections in women.
Wow.
And there was nothing to help prevent that. In fact, well, I won't go there further. And when we traveled to Cuba, this is really important for people to hear too, because I want to talk about the broad bandwidth of this. It's important to understand Cuba was always a drug cartel. It was run by the Vatican, and they certainly processed a lot of children that they used.
Did you say the Vatican, Deborah?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, it was run by the Vatican, and of course the CIA. What of course happened back in the transition of Batista to Castro, which was a CIA insert, there were many wealthy Cubans who suddenly found that their properties were taken by the government. And
they've been
that's
through
why
what they're trying to put us through.
Yes.
Oh.
So let me describe this, because
Please.
I went to Cuba, and it's very important for people to understand. There are many ways to travel to Cuba. The majority of people that go on vacation or go to Cuba go to the bars. They go see Hemingway's place where he used to hang out, and they love to ride around in those vintage American cars. That's not Cuba. That's not Cuba. Cuba is what most people don't see because they don't have the eyes for it and they don't seek it out. They don't seek the truth of what's really happening in Cuba. So the best description of Cuba is as follows. Cuba is a prison island.
Ooh.
And there are over 200 prisons in that island. And there is an allotment, $25 a month stipend that the Cuban people get. They get also a ration card for food. The Cuban families have to live together because in many of the smaller towns, The water is only turned on an hour or two a day. And they have cisterns on their roofs where when the water's turned on, they open up the spigots and try to fill those cisterns with water so they have water. The towns are broken up into about 500 to 800 people segments, which is what's happening in this country right now. And I'll explain that also.
Deborah, even the Cuban people admit you got to admire their tenacity. They say the three great failures of the revolution were breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Well, yes, and if you sought for extra food over your vital needs, you were put in prison. Very common to be put in prison for just stealing a dozen eggs or some meat or some vegetables. We were told absolutely not to eat anything from vendors, any vegetables, nothing that was coming out of Cuba because of the water contamination, severe water contamination. Much of it was literally wastewater, untreated water, and they're putting that now into use here in the United States. We discovered, too, and you may not have ever heard of this, Jeff. I hadn't. It was called Operation Peter Pan. Operation Peter Pan. I'll explain that. During the transition between Batista and Castro, the wealthy Cuban families were told that their children from 16 years and younger were going to be put into re-education camps. And to avoid that, the Vatican initiated a fear campaign and also offered plane tickets to the United States so that these kids could be transported into the United States by our airplanes and given the passports, whatever documentation was needed for them to be transported into the United States, while their parents were left behind to try to deal quickly with the loss of all their assets. And there were about 12,000 children involved, predominantly young boys, and only 50% of those kids were ever recovered, were ever found. Operation Peter Pan.
Wow.
And yes, and I didn't know that. I also did not know that back during that time in the 70s when over Vietnam they were conducting weather control, and one of them was called Operation Popeye. And Operation Popeye was dumping water on the supply lines and literally making it impossible for the quote-unquote enemy, in other words, the people that we were attacking and experimenting and dropping Meton and many other types of toxins and poisons on them and testing our war equipment on these poor folks. They couldn't utilize ground transport of supplies because of the deluge of water that was created by weather modification. Again, Operation Popeye.
Yep.
At the same time, what I did not know and only found out because we went to Cuba and I started to really deeply research it, we were operating Operation Blue Nile. Now, right now, because this is all anecdotal, Operation Blue Nile or Operation Nile Blue. I can't remember how that was, it could be transposed, Nile Blue or Blue Nile. Nonetheless, again, at the same time of Operation Popeye, we were holding off water from Cuba. We were trying to literally...
Operation Nile Blue.
Okay, thank you. What that was about was preventing the tobacco production in Cuba. We were trying to reduce their revenue. What is now happening is Cuba has linked up with Venezuela. Venezuela has been supplying the petroleum. Again, petroleum never did come from dead dinosaurs. Fossil fuels is a myth, another myth. For those that don't know about that, the quickest way to become educated is watch The Origins of Oil by Prouty. And I would highly recommend you learn the truth around that. Now, I'm not suggesting that petroleum is a good energy resource. We always have had the opportunity to have clean energy, but they can't meter that. So the plans and this is important, I really underscore this, because I didn't know, and many others don't know, but back during the time that John F. Kennedy was warning us in that statement that I read earlier on in the program today, Jeff, there was a study group. They were working on a replacement for war so that we would not need to use war equipment and bombs. They knew that people would be tired of funding that, because it's certainly a black budget, which is why the government is controlling the drug cartels and the child trafficking and all of the black money that's being made and being put into the war machine that is now being used on all of us now here. But was the report from Iron Mountain. And many people have not heard of this report. And what that was about was, and you can watch the documentary on YouTube, and that is that was done by a pastor, a Christian man, and it does correlate to a lot of biblical prophecy. But the report itself does not correlate to biblical prophecy. And the YouTube is very good because it does describe what happened and how, to replace war, they needed to create something that was significantly dangerous, harmful, and deadly. And it had to be invented. So global warming, or AKA climate change, was invented back in the early 60s. And the corporate structure, in order to accomplish that, had to pollute the world, and they have. Then it had to be sold. They figured it would take about a generation and a half to significantly pollute the planet by all the dumping that they were doing at night, all the sewage dumps, all of now the use of electromagnetic frequencies, the heating up of the water. What's happening right now is they're heating up the ponds and the lakes, and that's causing the algae blooms. I know that you came from Florida, and you know that the governor declared a state of emergency because of the toxic algae blooms that were occurring there. Yeah, that's all being created.
Everybody laughed at Alex Jones when he said they're turning the frogs gay, but this stuff is actually documented.
Well, they're heating up the water, and that's also taking out the oxygen.
Yeah.
And so, but getting back to the report from Iron Mountain, I would highly, highly, highly recommend that everybody watch the YouTube video. It's an old rendition. It's not as fast-moving as the kind of pace that we live in now. For many, it could be very boring, but I hope that you don't look at it that way. I hope you take the time to open your mind and watch it and look at the psychological programming that has occurred since and now. And that will help, I think, people to understand the enormity of what we face and the understanding that climate change was created, and then the technologies of increased weather weapons systems have now come into play, and we have been massively hammered through all media, climate change, climate change, climate change. And this is a level of increased terror. The more fear that can be induced in society, the more malleable people are out of fear. And that's why we're having this discussion today, Jeff, so that people aren't as fearful. They understand that this has been a plot. It has been being overseen by psychopaths that control the global wealth and the secret societies. Whoever you want to call them are overlords, whatever. But it's important to understand the facts and reality. And while we are still able to communicate, which is quickly being eliminated, do you know that we found out during the fires, Jeff, that CAL FIRE here was taking out the ham radio repeaters so that the ham radios would not serve as they have in the past. In fact, the telecom industry is taking those over now. They're cutting off communication. Here during the fires, we lost cell phone towers. Right now, in the forced power shutdowns, we're losing cell phone towers.
It makes perfect sense if they're trying to, it just makes sense. It all is an agenda. And you have a quote on your website I wanted to read, because I think this is the focus of what we're talking about. Silence in the face of evil is evil itself. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. And I believe it was also Bonhoeffer or Niemöller that said, when they came for the gypsies, I wasn't a gypsy, so I didn't do anything. When they came for the Jehovah's Witnesses, I wasn't a Jehovah's Witness, so I didn't do anything. When they came for the Jews, I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't do anything. When they finally came for me, there was nobody left to do anything. And he concluded that by saying, all that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And when your neighbor loses their job, that's a recession. When you lose your job, that's a depression. Now, my buddy Sam Tripoli, tinfoil hat, had his channel taken down today. So it's happening to all of us, and we need to wake up and not be fearful, but wake up and realize what's going on. And there is a crime being perpetrated against us. It is time to stop that crime. So I'm glad that you're here today, Deborah, and you're opening our eyes and getting us aware of these things, because that's the first step to fighting back, is realizing that you have an enemy and who your enemy is.
Well, that's absolutely true, Jeff. And again, we have to stand up. We have to be warriors. And again, silence in the face of an enemy is acquiescence. It's consent. And we have to do something, act in any way that you can, because essentially it's our humanity that gives us hope. It's our understanding of where we go when
Absolutely.
Our human bodies are over. We default into eternity, our souls. So we can never, ever give up while we're in these bodies. We are told to stand. We are told to stand. And we are facing an incremental, regional consolidation of evil policies that are set to reduce the population. These are eugenic policies that have been rolled out. And in the climate action plans, and you pulled one of yours up, I know that many of you can find them dated even earlier than 2019. But I want to say this now because I want to plant this understanding with everybody. Here's what's happening, and this is more or less the process. We discovered that we had green energy loans that our cities had to adopt. Now, you can type in, Jeff, green energy loans in your location or your state, and you're going to find, most likely, you're going to find some type of loan that's going to come up, and it's going to allow you to finance energy improvements in your home. And here,
bringing all that stuff that they can weaponize, huh?
Yes. And here's what's happening. Right now, and you can also type this in, climate action emergency. And this is rolling out across the country. Our de facto city councils and our boards of supervisors are declaring climate emergencies. And what that is the rolling out more expeditiously of required retrofitting in all existing housing. And what the retrofitting is going to look like is replacement. Now, some of this is not a bad idea. Some of this you will reduce your energy cost. And some of it is a horrific idea. and it requires a smart meter because all new appliances must be Energy Star appliances. They are wireless, and they communicate with the smart meter on your home. And so do the thermostats, many of the smoke detectors, many of your new electric hot water heaters. In fact, we found out here just recently that, and for the moment at least, when you're required to transition out of natural gas, which is also a requirement, eliminating natural gas in your home, such as your water heater or your gas cooktop, you have to eliminate that and replace that with electric or induction cooking is what they're calling it. But we learned that the hot water replacement, or I should say the heat and air replacement, is a duo replacement. It's a system that is heat and air conditioning. And you, at least for the moment, you can't purchase just a heat system. There are parts of the country right now that aren't having the weather modified to the extent that the heat is impossible to endure and don't have air conditioning. But you're forced to buy that system. But I can tell you this. The weather is going to be heated up across the country. We're going to see massive power outages because of the electrification of the environment.
And Deborah, I'm just getting out of the chat room, a fellow named Jack, J-A-K. He's a pool cleaner in Texas, and he says that he has recently been seeing I don't know if it's the right word, the hugest or the biggest outbreak of algae that he's ever seen in all his years of doing this work.
Yeah, in the pools. What I guess he's referring to that? Yeah, it's because the environment is being heated up and by technologies, and the water is hot. And what is happening is this, and of course this would apply to pools as well, but think of ponds. Okay, so the water in the ponds on ranches, etc., are heated up. When they release that water, even in reservoirs, it's hot water. Okay, the oxygen has been reduced. They release it, and it's killing the fish. It's intentionally killing the fish. Now, I'm going to move into this because I need to. I feel like I'm really dumping a lot of information on your listeners right now.
You are, but it's necessary.
Okay. Well, again, I'm going to refer everybody back to stopthecrime.net and definitely that 5-part video YouTube series, because what you're going to hear me say now, a couple of things are. And
hopefully, Deborah, we can get to, all this information is powerful. It's incredible. We need it. A lot of us have been awoken, and I hope you're going to give us some strategies for where we go from here, so we're not just sitting huddled in our houses saying, "Oh no, what do we do?"
Well, yeah, I can discuss that right now, actually. Everybody's idea of where they go from here is understanding what they face.
Ooh.
So my idea of what I would be doing would be different from somebody else that doesn't understand the depth of what's occurring. Okay? So while people are digesting reality, they're going to take different measures. But I will say this. You need to get to water. Everybody needs to get to water. If you have friends that have country property and have wells, you need to drill for primary water immediately. They are putting up and have had a moratorium in Ventura County in California now against well drilling. They just implemented a well drilling moratorium in Santa Monica, where one of the original Rand corporations is centered and where UCLA is. And it was interesting that they would implement a well moratorium there because there was only one well. And they were able to implement that moratorium and get that put in without anybody really opposing it. But they're going to start eliminating your possibility to drill if you're on country property. And the reason you need to get to primary water is because soon they're going to come out with code enforcement and with city inspectors and even attempt to get your neighbors to report on you if you don't have a meter on your well. Now, I can only say, for those of you, there are many people that will not allow people on their property to put a meter on their well. They will not. Whatever that means to you, that means to you.
Interesting.
But if you are able and you have the resources and you have family members that want to help contribute to the drilling of an additional well to hit primary water, I would recommend you do that now.
Is it possible for people to drill on their own, or do you have to have specialized equipment?
Well, that's a good question. The well drillers don't know about primary water, so they don't know how to find it and locate it. And they drill a certain depth. They'll hit an aquifer at a higher level. It certainly has water, and they'll gravel pack it and line it and put a pump in it, and there you are. Well, in primary water, you're trying to find structures to drill into, more rock structures where the water is coming through the cracks. And you actually have
Gotcha.
you actually don't gravel pack and line them. You only gravel pack, and this may be too much for some of the listeners, but I've been on many primary water drills, and I've seen how it's done. And it is not that horrifically expensive. But I will tell you this. If you do not access water and they put a meter on your well, and they're telling us now there are too many straws in the water that must be shared with your neighbors. In other words, this sustainability is all about equity.
Right.
And if somebody has a straw, they're claiming that you're stealing the water from someone else. That's not true.
It's not a zero-sum game.
Exactly. So water, you asked me some other things. Definitely the idea of solar. You have to put more solar panels than the engineers will tell you because there is increased solar dimming. And the engineers are unaware of that. They don't design into that. So more solar panels get solar up. You want battery backup. You do not want the Tesla or the lithium-ion batteries. You want silicon salt. And we'll be talking more about that I'll have YouTubes up on that.
Excellent.
Certainly we need to become more self-reliant in every way that we can. We have to align with a network of people that are in our geographical location to help sustain the food supply among ourselves. This is called black market. This is called how you live in prison and survive in prison in black markets. And in order to survive, we're going to have to assist one another in exchanging food. Because I told you earlier in this program that everything is being transitioned worldwide to GMO and Monsanto and scientifically created and grown food via executive order. The same thing with the rollout of 5G. This is under executive order. Back on January 18th of 2018, the CEO Trump signed on to that expeditious rollout, not allowing any jurisdictions, cities, tribal lands, anybody to deny the rollout, to eliminate all obstacles. And that's why people are protesting against the 5G rollout in many cities throughout the United States and certainly in Europe. I know a number of people in London that have actually been protesting against the LED weaponized new streetlights because they have phased array equipment inside, and they can target people, and they do.
That's why I laugh about phased array. That's some military technology.
Yes, it is. I want to say this, too. After the fires, and you're going to find this in areas where anyone has been hit by floods, they're deploying LIDAR systems, which is a military frequency for battlefields. And they are deploying these on the hilltops now in many communities where they can 24/7, 365 surveil with infrared and detect the damage that's incurred, such as where are the fires, what is the damage of the earthquakes, have the floods been successful? And I say that because this is war. They're checking on the success. They're selling it to us as an emergency alert system for our safety. It's not. It's to see how successful their targeting is on us. Don't get confused about anything coming out of your cities or government for your safety. That's how they're selling more weaponized technology. I want to also talk about what is being discussed now are microgrids. Certainly here in our area, because of the power shutdowns and people have their electricity turned off, they're talking about community microgrids, literally creating green renewable energy systems to replace the traditional system that we have right now with our utility company. And that looks like this. This is what they're promoting. They're promoting increased solar panels. In fact, that's a requirement on all new construction in California next year. Excuse me. On all new construction in California next year. And with the lithium-ion batteries, again, I was saying these are weapons. They are weapons. They want us tied to the grid with this. It connects to Wi-Fi, and it also has an individual wireless smart meter connected with it as well. It connects to the Internet of Things the way they want you to install and pay for your solar. Okay, keep in mind, you're constructing a weapon on your property if you do it the way the government is telling you you should,
right.
And how all of the solar technicians are taught. They're taught to deploy weapons, and they don't know it. Just like your linemen that work for your utility companies are deploying the smart meters. We're deploying these things upon ourselves for paychecks. And many people don't understand that.
That's so
and our
true. And
money,
what's so scary is just a few years ago, I came very, very close to getting involved in a big way with the Tesla whole house solar, whole house battery. And I was making a lot of money, and I just realized something was wrong. And I don't really know now until today, the full realization of what was going on hasn't hit me, which is good.
well, I want to say this, that we have a very dear friend who was actually within a few miles of the most recent fire here called the Kincaid Fire that was burning in October here. And a retired fire captain. In fact, you can meet him on my video channel. He did a community meeting. We had a community meeting, and it's entitled Fire, Power Outages, Community Meeting. You'll see it on my YouTube channel.
Okay.
Anyway, they had recently installed a Tesla Powerwall battery setup, which is required to be in your garages, by the way.
In California, that's required?
Well, it needs to be in the garages or in
okay.
a
I know what
structure.
you're saying. I got you.
Yeah, in a structure because of weather, and that's what they say.
Right.
Now, the silicon salt batteries are what some of the utilities use on keeping batteries in distant cell phone towers because they can be in the cold, the heat. They don't degrade, and they don't explode and cause fires either. But they're not going to tell you that. Just like the electric bikes that I mentioned, those have lithium-ion batteries, and those have been blowing up. Would you like to be sitting on a bike with a lithium-ion battery underneath you? I don't think so.
Turning into a soprano really quickly, or a tenor.
Well,
I guess a
I
10
can I can only say the weapons are unimaginable. They're just unimaginable, Jeff. They're coming at us in every way. So you asked me more things that people could do to empower themselves. Start passing out flyers that you can download for free from stopthecrime.net. Share our videos, our YouTubes. It's open source. You can take anything off of stopthecrime.net or primarywater.org, and we want you to. We want you to take anything and spread it far and wide.
Someone in the chat room said they had passed out like 4,000 of your flyers.
I thank you. I thank you. Thank you. I hope everyone else is listening to that, because it is going to take this kind of passion to help warn people that are unaware. Now, before I knew, I said I didn't know, but now that I know, I will not sit and watch. It would be like sitting and watching somebody walk through an intersection on a light that allows
Deborah,
them
please
to
keep going for a second. I have to step away just for 2 seconds. I'll be right back.
That's fine. Absolutely. It would be like watching somebody cross the street when they're allowed to in the crosswalk, but you see a car coming that's going to wheel through that crosswalk and hit them. Do you stand there and say nothing? Do you let them get hit? No. This is what we must now do to our fellow neighbors in our communities. Originally, when we were working to try to slow down the deployment of the smart meters, and we were given the opt-out here in Sonoma County, the method behind what you're hearing me talk about right now is to get this information out as far and wide as possible, to keep this from getting to your threshold and literally taking you down one house at a time. And if we can get this information out, help empower people, I can only say this: the trauma is horrible. It is painful. People go into panic attacks when they hear this kind of information, but get over it. You'll get through your panic, and then you are going to be empowered.
It's better to have a panic and get over it than to never find out about it till it's too late, because then your panic is permanent.
That's exactly right. And then, of course, we know the expanded mental hospitals and the idea that people will be incarcerated, their prisons. And it's like, now, do you talk much about, well, before I go there, I want to talk about targeted individuals in a second, but I want to talk about primarywater.org and the half-page flyer that I hope people pass out. And I wasn't sure what flyer the person in the chat was passing out, but I want to refer to this also. It's on primarywater.org, and it's a half-page flyer. Please print them out. It's entitled "Primary Water: Why We Don't Have a Water Shortage." And I'm going to read the flyer. Do not let the PSYOPs media campaign frighten you about the scarcity of water. The Earth is the water planet and continuously produces water from within. In fact, water is a renewable. We have an abundance of water. Why would the corporate government agencies create the false science of water scarcity and the fear that we're running out? The goal is to control money and creating compliance to water monitoring, required reduced water usage, and charging higher usage costs on all based upon our ignorance of where water really comes from. Sadly, out of fear, many people will forfeit their ranches, farms, and livelihoods, believing they are out of water due to the droughts and more. Primary water is in abundance, and we must start looking down for water instead of up. So I have some YouTubes I recommend that are on this flyer as well. Certainly one is called Primary Water Explained. So for those of you that might be writing things down, I hope you are. Listen to the video YouTube, Primary Water Explained, also Water Crisis Hoax. And really, I did a video some time ago, and it's really important. It's called Water Wars, Stealing Water for Profit and Control. Water Wars, Stealing Water for Profit and Control. Please share that far and wide. Please share that far and wide. You're going to learn, among many things, that the government is a corporation, that even our legal system is working on behalf of the corporate structure. You're going to learn the truth about attorneys and lawyers. You're going to learn many facts. And we found documents out of London and out of Israel that we talk about during that YouTube video. And the intentional allowing of our infrastructure to collapse because of intentional lack of maintenance. And I want to say a few things about that right now. We talked about the solar with the type of connections being weaponized, Jeff. I need to explain how the infrastructure in our country and worldwide now has been weaponized. We never needed to build. Now, this might be too much of a conversation for the time that we have left. How much time do we have? Jeff? Whoops.
I'm sorry, I had muted myself. We probably do need to start thinking about trying to wrap it up, in the next 15 minutes or so.
Yeah. Okay, well, I want to throw this out. I want to throw two ideas out, and I want to know, I will tell you where you can go to have a broader discussion. And again, that's part of the 5-part video YouTube series that I keep referring to. But I also want you to look at the new posts. And again, I want to underscore, this is not a California thing. I want you to think in your town, it's happening. Right. Now, here's what is happening. The infrastructure worldwide has been allowed to degrade. We're talking about dams. We're talking about what the use of reservoirs are really for, because we never needed to catch the toxic atmospheric water and disperse it with added pollutants and poisons into our municipal water supply when we had primary water. When Saddam Hussein, when Muammar Gaddafi, built the Great Man-Made River Project, which you'll find more information on primarywater.org, where they created and built a labyrinth of plumbing under the desert floor, and we're greening up the desert and actually using the oil resources and profits for the people. And we're delivering about 75% of primary water for free.
That's why they took out Gaddafi. That's one of the main reasons.
One of the reasons. He was always also trying to break away from the banksters and creating the dinar as gold backed. And he had free education, free housing, free water for the people. And they blew up the Great Man-Made River Project. It is a sight to see, because you can go on YouTube and you can actually on primarywater.org we have a lot of links where you can see the construction of that. It is horrific what they did. We also had someone, a whistleblower, contact us that they were taking out the well drilling equipment that was purchased from London and saying, oh, gee, they looked like missile launchers. They knew they were not missile launchers. They were taking out the capability of drilling for primary water after they took the whole system out.
Yeah. All you have to do, Deborah, is look at pictures of Libya, Tripoli, before we brought democracy. Look at pictures of Baghdad before we brought democracy. Look at pictures of Beirut, Lebanon, before we brought democracy. We're not bringing anything good.
We're killing the people.
We are.
We're destroying people. And we're watching it happen over there under the idea that we are spreading democracy. Look at what's happening in our own country. We're being killed within. It's a silent weapons system that is destroying us. And the policies have been set. And it has been a very slow, incremental process. And the plans are in. And the retrofitting is going to be required. The green financing for the retrofitting is predatory. It sits above your home mortgage and it becomes a line item in your property tax bill. You can lose your home if you do not pay your green retrofitting requirements in 60 days. They can start foreclosure proceedings. This is a Rockefeller loan, and I talk about that as a PACE, P-A-C-E loan here in California and Florida. PACE loans are approved in California and Florida. There are other types of energy loans approved already in the rest of the country. So here's what it looks like. The loans have been approved in the country, in all the cities, by your cities. They're in place so that they can access the requirements now to cause you to retrofit your homes with all of this. We're talking about anywhere between $20,000 and $50,000 to retrofit your homes. We're talking cool roofs, added insulation, change out of all appliances, changing out of gas. You have to have electricians come in and add wiring to change out your gas range or your gas water heater to electric. You need electricians. What we have now in Los Angeles is this requirement. If you do not do the retrofitting, now this is applying now to multifamily apartment construction. If you do not do the retrofitting, you are put on a list as being unsustainable. And they're taking 50% of the rent from the owners. And you cannot refinance and you cannot sell. And it's very difficult to get off of this list as being unsustainable and not meeting the requirements of reducing your greenhouse gas emissions and have 50% of your rent taken. Now, this sounds insane. It is. That's happening right now in the city of Los Angeles. Right now. Right now, also, they're rolling out requirements to retrofit for earthquakes. Now, dams and reservoirs cause earthquakes. Fake lakes make quakes. I want you to keep that in mind. This is an infrastructure set up as booby traps around this country. The same thing for the wastewater treatment plants. In February of 2018, here in Sonoma County, in Santa Rosa, actually, we had an atmospheric river, a fake atmospheric river placed over our county, and we were dumped on with water. It literally swamped our wastewater treatment plant, and water sewage that was not treated was spilling out by I forget now how many gallons, but it flooded into the low-lying water areas there, down into the streams and creeks, and into what is called the Russian River that flows along Bohemian Grove out to the Pacific. It wiped out many businesses, and a couple thousand homes along the Russian River were damaged because of water. Now, the contamination was only discussed for about a day or two, and then the contamination of the untreated wastewater was not discussed again. So the wastewater treatment plants are being swamped all over the world. I was looking into that. The coastlines are under attack by other technologies to create coastal shore erosion. And there are plans along all the coastlines. It's called planned retreat. They're already being written into the building codes and planning codes along the low-lying coastlines worldwide. In fact, the military bases and any military operations that are in low-lying areas, do you know, Jeff, they're being moved to higher ground?
I did not know that.
Now you do. Now you do. Look at my video YouTube that I put up quite some time ago. I've certainly elaborated on much of that since, but it's called Coastlines Under Attack. Just type in and please circulate that YouTube far and wide, that video YouTube, Coastlines Under Attack. And we're showing you military documents. We are showing you planned retreat. In fact, when we went to London, we looked at England, and England, the coastlines are under attack there too. And in Wales, they've already relocated a town of about 400 people to higher ground. People have to walk away from their homes because they are consumed by the sea, or the fear that the sea will consume them. This is an immense attack. It's coming from many areas. You do have to be careful geographically where you live. You don't want to live on low-lying coastal areas because we have discovered what is happening in those beachfront areas, and that includes Hawaii as well.
Wow.
Planned retreat worldwide. Worldwide, Jeff. Worldwide. And why they want us off the coastal areas are many. It's a massive land grab. And they want us away from the negative ions that are in the atmosphere as the waves crash onto the coasts. That reduces the ability to be easily mind controlled and manipulated. Right. So they want us inland, off of the coastal areas for mind control purposes, which is all part of the 5G rollout. That's for mind control.
Amazing information. And it's so, it's good to get the information so we know what's happening. Better to be, what do they say? To be forewarned is to be forearmed. And that's what we need to do to be able to put up a fight. We have to be armed with the reality and know what we're facing.
Well, that's exactly right. And I'm happy to join you again because we're spending much time in these meetings where we're watching these evil policies being approved, and we're reading these policies, and we articulate these policies. This is not our idea. This is not our assessment. We are articulating the policies.
Right. I get it. And you've seen me look down. I've been getting, talking a little bit with Rex Bear, who's got a great YouTube channel. I think he'll probably invite you to come on his channel with, I think, 400,000 subscribers. So it's important to get this message out. I hope you do get a chance to talk with Rex.
Well, I want to say now that we all have to band together as much and as far as we can get this information out. We need to. Again, everything on stopthecrime.net is open source. I'm happy to talk to anybody that wants to share this information, join anybody on their radio shows. Please, we need to get this information out. And then hopefully this will snowball. Hopefully we can help one another because we need to help one another. And most importantly, we have to live in right conduct every single day. And we have to love the ones we love even more.
Absolutely. And we all have our own individual things that we believe that we don't all believe. But I think it's very important for us to, as a community, be able to come together in unity, even though there are some things that there's diversity within that unity, and there's nothing wrong with that. Let's don't say we all have to be 100% in agreement before we can work together, because that'll leave all of us working by ourselves.
Well, that's true. And again, I think the more we realize that we're going to have an underground black market in order to survive, because we're going to have to disconnect from the umbilical cord that was created during the Industrial Revolution to literally disempower us. And we know that the farms are being hit, the farmers are being put out of business, they're underwater, the levees are being breached. Do you know that they have these, like they're rodents, they're huge, that literally are burrowing into the levees here in California and causing them to collapse?
That's amazing. I didn't know that. Deborah, one thing that just hit me, I wanted to ask before you leave. Is it better for people to relocate outside the United States, or is that just going from the frying pan to the fire?
Yeah, absolutely not. Let me discuss that a little bit because lots of people talk about that. This is a global plan. You can type in anywhere you think you want to go. Costa Rica, for example. Many people are thinking that's a great place. And you can type in climate action plans. They have climate action plans. You can type in planned retreat in the country. If you're thinking of a coastal area, planned retreat is everywhere. Chemtrailing has no borders. Frequencies and cell towers and cell phones have absolutely no borders. In some countries, there are no landlines. Everything is frequency-based. Fluoride is in most places, in many places, I would say. And so you can't get away. What we're finding now, I will tell you some personal experience in Ecuador. Now, many of you may not know that about a month or 6 weeks or so ago, the IMF and the international bankers who have taken over Ecuador increased fuel cost, and the Ecuadorians shut down the major cities. We're talking about the indigenous people of Ecuador. Even some of the indigenous people came from Peru to help some of their Ecuadorian neighbors shut down cities. There were about 1,500 people killed, more than 1,500 people put in hospitals. They shut down the cities to stop the increase in fuel cost.
In Ecuador?
In Ecuador. You didn't hear this, but you are hearing this now because our news is sectioned now. We're not being told what's happening. So now let me further explain. So when we visited Ecuador, there are police stops. If, say, for example, you're traveling an hour because you have to rent a cab, when you're traveling in Ecuador, most people get around by taxi. A few people own cars. The wealthier people own cars. But they have police checkpoints, random checkpoints set up, not always in the same place. They'll pull you over and check your ID. And when we were trying to depart out of Ecuador, and I will just tell you this is a personal story. We were in Guayaquil. It's a coastal city where the largest airport is. And we had to drive many hours from where we were to get to Guayaquil. Our plane was leaving about 5 a.m. in the morning. We went into the lobby of the hotel, and we were stunned. There were boards across the glass doors of the lobby with police with guns guarding the doors in case there were any break-ins. We were really surprised. So we were shuttled to the airport, and we went through TSA. Then we went through another TSA. Things were taken from our bags and told that they were not permitted, and yet they were on the inbound flight. Then when we were sitting to board, and we waited for quite some time, our names were called over the intercom system, and they were speaking Spanish, and we didn't understand, but we heard our names, and we understood they wanted us. So we went, and my boarding pass was taken from me. And they wanted to do another security check. And I asked them, who's doing it? And they said American Airlines. And they boarded the plane, Jeff, with my husband standing there. He was able to board, but he wasn't going to leave me.
Right.
They were boarding the plane. And I was standing there, and I was saying to the attendants there, I need my boarding pass. I need to get on this plane. And they said, well, we need to inspect everything again. They went through my carry-ons again. I had to spread eagle. They did the whole wand. And then I saw them hand the boarding pass over to an attendant, and they stamped something on it. So as I was walking to get onto the plane, I looked at the stamp. It was a happy face.
Oh, my.
they were trying to intimidate me.
Yeah.
And while we haven't yet discussed targeted individuals, we need to. Have you discussed targeted individuals on your program before?
I have never discussed targeted individuals on my program before. I've always kind of thought that was in the crazy sector, to be honest with you.
Okay, so we need to break through that for you. We
I'm
need
totally
to,
open to that.
yeah, we need to certainly invite your listeners to understand the enormity of what the dark, deep aspects of military operations are now engaged worldwide. And I will just say this, and we're going to need, I would love to come back sooner than later.
That would be great.
Because this is intensifying. There are millions and millions of people worldwide that are being gang-stalked, bullied, and shot with directed energy weapons and literally murdered at a distance.
You know, like Tracy Dyer, one of my right-hand moderator, she says for some people it is a crazy factor, but there are legitimate target individuals.
We're all targeted now, but some are targeted in different ways.
Yeah.
And I have spent many hours interviewing people on some of the radio shows that I've had in the past. Right. And brought them on, and I've asked one thing: how can we help you? And they said, believe us. Ooh. Believe us. So I invite you, Jeff, into the world of targeted individuals. I invite you and all the listeners to understand how we are being taken down and what is happening in that world of targeting. It is torturous, it is diabolical, and it has been a weaponized program to destroy people's lives. Many of the homeless people are targeted and being drugged. This is a topic that we just really can't discuss further at this time because it deserves more time than we can give it right now.
We'll schedule a time for you to come back, and how about we make that our focus?
Well, and we will.
That sounds
everybody
great.
I really appreciate everyone that has been listening. I certainly, again, can't underscore we must empower ourselves. We must take action. Just sitting there and listening to this and being traumatized is not going to serve you. Taking action will serve you. Listen to some of the ways in which you can empower yourselves. Go and look at that video that we did in our community. Again, fires, power outages, community meeting. Understand what you need to do with your homes, particularly if you're in the country on wells, because when they turn the power off, unless you have different kinds of generators and backup systems, you're not pumping water. And that's become a real problem. So I just hope that I'm leaving enough information that will empower people. But the first journey is understanding what we face, and that's by and large what I was trying to do on your show right now, Jeff. And I really appreciate being on your show.
Well, Deborah, it's been an honor and a privilege to have you, and we'll definitely have you back to talk about targeted individuals. And I feel it's very likely that you'll be back on a regular basis. At least I hope so, because this is very important information. It's vital information, and there's not a lot of people that have the courage and the integrity to share it. And we certainly want to take advantage of your expertise and your willingness. And this is information that you have. It's hard-won information, and we appreciate you sharing it with us. Somebody said you are a beautiful champion. Retro Modern Art says that, and I would certainly concur. And I would just want to thank you again, Deborah, for being with us. Wish you nothing but the best, and encourage you to continue to be safe and continue to be loud, because we do need you.
Thank you, Jeff, and I will come back. Just invite me anytime. We'll work it out. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And Jeff, very nice to meet you.
You bet. All the best to you, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Thank you.
Take care.